The doom interview is here. That is right. Donald Trump is going to sit down with CNN. It might be a dig at Fox, and it might be the end of the world for the liberal world order because, as we know, we can't let Donald Trump do anything and get his message out, even if he is a mainline candidate. But we'll be talking about that, what's happening with that, and what some of the reactions are with that as well. In other news, a major flux of immigrants is expected down at the border, and Joe Biden readies 1,500 troops to come down to the border and go, well, try to help out with some of the registrations and maybe even try to stop some of the surge. But we'll talk about that, what's happening there and what that means. Ireland unleashes a new law only allowing its citizens to get their news from mainstream media, which means people like me are out. So we'll be talking about that. Plus, critics like Elon Musk are slamming onto that. So we'll be talking just a bit about that. And a federal judge rules that a Pennsylvania school district must allow an after-school Satan club because, well, we'll delve into that one here. I haven't pre-read this one, but I'm sure that it's going to be just as shocking as we think it's going to be. It is going to be all of this and more. I was the one flying the balloons. I am J. Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is J. Edgar, and this is your evening news. We've got a lot to go over here tonight. It's not as busy as it was yesterday, with the exception of the fact that we've still got a lot of carryover from yesterday's show. We'll try to get through some of this here. Today actually was not that big of a news day, honestly, especially given all the hell that we went through over the weekend, so maybe we'll even get to catch up with some of the stuff that we picked up and left behind over the weekend. I did take a few things back off of yesterday's stack and added them to things I like and things that things I like, things I hate. Segment on Thursday is going to be massive. That much I can tell you right off the bat. There's going to be a ton of stuff coming from that. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be going over the Town Hall of Doom, as the title implies here. I even threw a story on the stack here talking about this mysterious photo that was AI generated of Trump in military uniform, and the fact that the community notes had to come back out and tell us what everybody knew already, and the fact that the Orange Man never went into the military. So, but hey, if they do it for one, they've got to go back and do it for all. So we're going to be going over that. We've got a little bit of an extended finance segment today. Based on the fact that not only do we have the Dow Jones report and the layoffs report, but I've actually got a report on crypto, because it looks like the Biden admin is going to try to throw a tax on top of crypto, and the housing market is on the edge of the bubble. The bubble is on the edge of the needle, and it may pop, and they're already talking about what's coming up here in the summer, which, I mean, for somebody who's going out to try to buy a house like me, that's some pretty awesome news right now. But for a lot of other people who, as we talked about yesterday, all of their major wealth is wrapped up in their house, that's probably not going to be a good thing, especially if they do intend to either try to get money back out of the house that they suddenly owe more than it's worth on, or one of the bigger problems is if they do have to move in a sudden fashion. And it does happen every once in a while too. Like, I had no idea at September of this past year that I was going to be sitting in the city that I'm sitting in right now. There was absolutely no indicator in my life that was going to happen, and then just one day the job comes up, and it's either sit there and go back and do the thing where you're sitting here and wondering if you're ever going to get a pay raise again, or sitting here and getting a substantial pay raise and now looking at the barrel of buying a house. So we've got a lot to talk about over here on Contemporary. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys. Go check out Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, The No Gimmicks Podcast, and more as we bring you a better news experience from the common man for the common man. Let's get into the news of the day. Get the live chat up here. See who's going to be watching, who isn't going to be watching. And, by the way, do feel free on every platform. And we are on YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, Odyssey, DLive, Twitter, somewhere. They tell me that it's there, but I've never been able to find it. But over on Twitter, on Facebook, every single platform you can come back and find me. With a few coming up, by the way, too. I've been recommended by not Mr. Behavior, Mr. Scott, to go try Kick, which I think I'm going to be doing that as well coming up in the near future. But everywhere you can find us, you can go find and chat. And, I don't do a dedicated chat segment every day, and I don't get to everybody's chats. But I do look at them going every day, so we'll see what's happening with that. Let's get down into the finance for the day, because we got a lot going on there. And let's get started. We are going to start today, as we always do, with the Dow, looking at the industrials, which also took a big tumble today. The futures dropped, and then it kind of started off into a smiley face. It started to recover towards the end of the day, but just not enough to come back up above the previous close. The Dow ending the day at 33,684.53. That is down 367.17 points. I always, because of the Bitcoin, I always want to say US dollars, and I do know that it is a reflection of US dollars, but it's not dollar for dollar US dollar, but that's down 1.08% on the Dow today. So we'll be talking about that in the CNBC article that accompanies this. The Bitcoin, on the other hand, took a major spike throughout the day today, staying steady throughout most of the overnight hours before spiking up at the end of the day, or middle of the day rather, and then just steadily rising through the rest of the day, ending at $28,780 US dollars and 40 US cents. That is up $705 US dollars and 90 US cents, or 2.5% on the day. Looking in at the gas prices in Madison, comparing what we have been comparing for the last 3 years, since gas prices took their tumble down to sometimes below $1 in some places. I actually have filled up at below $1 in numerous places at that very specific time period, that time period where I took some time and drove to Florida. But the gas prices are staying steady in the Madison area, $3.40 on the west side, with $3.30 coming down here. So some of the west side starting to catch up. On the east side, $3.30 is the standard, $3.20 on the isthmus, and $3.30 entering the isthmus, which was at $3.36 yesterday. So we're starting to steady around the $3.30 mark. Your gas prices may be different. Check your local listings to see what's going on there. We use the same map because it's a apt comparison of the same 14 gas stations over a 3-year period. Let's grab one from CNBC. Let's talk about what's happening there. The Dow tumbles more than 300 points as banking sector worries reignite before Fed rate decision from Ha-Kyung Kim and Alex Herring. Stocks tumbled on Tuesday's traders' fears around contagion in the regional banking sector returned ahead of the Federal Reserve's rate decision. The Dow fell 367.17 points, or 1.08% rather, to end at 33,684.53. The S&P slid 1.16% to close at 41,1958. The Nasdaq dropped 1.08 ending the session at 1280.51. The three major averages fell for a second consecutive session. Bank shares slid, with the SPDR S&P Regional Banking ETF dropping more than 6% because we just had the second biggest bank collapse in history. And people are trying to report it as this was a win for the banking sector. Traders question the stability of smaller regional financial institutions after the crisis that engulfed Wall Street in March and brought about the end of Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic. Regional banks, PacWest and Western Alliance, declined 27% and 15% respectively. Meanwhile, JP Morgan's Chase's shed 1.6% after a big spike yesterday, by the way, giving back some of its gains from a previous session. A day earlier, JP Morgan shares rose after the takeover of embattled regional First Republic. Other large banks, including Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, also dropped more than 2%. Bank of America fell 3%. We think that the concerns around the banking sector, combined with uneasiness regarding the debt ceiling and, more importantly, apprehension over the uncertain future Fed rate policy stance, are all contributing to this risk-off sentiment. So in an area like the bank sector that already was under stress, we're going to see greater unease because of these other contributing factors, said Greg Bosuk, CEO of AXS Investments. The Fed's two-day policy meeting, which kicked off Tuesday, is expected to conclude with the central bank announcing another quarter-point rate hike on Wednesday. Per the CME Group's FedWatch tool, traders are pricing in a roughly 85% chance of a rate hike. Investors will be looking for clues on whether the Fed will keep rates steady after this meeting or if it will further tighten monetary policy to fight inflation. So that is what we're seeing in the banking sector, and it's going to start to go down on everything else. We're getting to that point where we're either in a stagflationary cycle or, as we're going to see in just a couple articles, what the housing market is going to do, and none of it's looking good right now. As I said at the top, a lot of people, the only portion of their wealth is either in the stock market, which that's a day-to-day thing at this point. We're just waiting for the bottom to drop out of that, or their home. So we'll see what happens with that. Let's grab one from CoinDesk. White House pushes for punitive tax on crypto mining. So this is not necessarily old crypto or crypto that you've already been holding, but this is if you're doing a transaction for it or if you are creating new crypto. This is from Jesse Hamilton. President Biden is looking to impose a punitive tax on crypto mining operations for the harms they impose on society. The White House's Council of Economic Advisors argued Tuesday in an online post. The admin's blog entry made a case for the U.S. tax equal to 30% of a mining firm's energy costs, an unusual industry-specific penalty that could threaten the profits of such businesses. Currently, crypto mining firms do not have to pay the full cost they impose on others. Oh my god. In the form of local environmental pollution, higher energy prices, and the impacts of increased greenhouse gas emissions on the climate, according to the CEA's description of the levy known as the Digital Asset Mining Energy Tax. Yeah, when are they going to crack down on some of these big gaming rigs, which don't do, by the way. I'm telling you right off the bat, don't do, but the argument behind this is that when you're doing a crypto mining, when you're running the transactions and holding the ledgers for a lot of these things, and even, as I said before, generating some of the crypto, you're running a fairly high-performance computer system at full blast, as if, again, you were playing some of the top-of-the-line video games on PC. It was part of the reason that graphics cards were going for such huge amount, because their internal processor and their internal RAM was able to handle some of what was going on with this, and was able to do something. Well, it was drawing so much more energy. Now, yes, I will admit to the fact that, having the bigger, more powerful PC does draw more energy, and I noticed that in my electric bills once the big rig sitting down here was actually built. But for me, it's negligible. I don't have a super powerful graphics card either, which I think we got to change here somewhere in the near future, but there's that aspect to this. But one of the other sides of this is, crypto mining is not as huge of an industry as it was when it first lit up. Like, businesses have come up to try to do some of this and take it out of the private sector's hands. But again, the big part of this is the government wants to neuter cryptocurrency, because it is a threat to them. It's a decentralized system where they're not controlling the ebb and the flow of the cash, especially when it comes down to Bitcoin, because that's the one that your soccer moms are using. Bitcoin and Ethereum are the big ones. The ones that people trust. We can put this in our portfolio because it's tried and tested and true, which it's really not, but Soccer Mom America uses, they either use them or they trade in those two big ones. There are a few other ones out there, like I have Doge and Shiba. One of the two was a boon and the other one was a big mistake. And there are a ton of other small altcoins out there, but really the big ones and the ones that are most energy intensive are those two. But all the mining for those has been bought up either by other nations. Like El Salvador uses crypto as their main currency. They use Bitcoin as their main currency, and they use a large geothermal vent to power geothermal power to run their operations. So for the most part, this is just tried to scare people to sell off their Bitcoin. I hope that the people that are out there that see this and understand this hold on with diamond hands, but we'll see what happens with this and where this goes. Our layoffs report. Not necessarily a big shed today, but just an idea of what the big sheds are doing here. From Reuters, U.S. job openings drop, layoffs hit highest level in more than 2 years. But don't worry, the economy's fine and everything's fine. From Lucia Mutakani. U.S. job openings fell for a third straight month in March, and layoffs increased to the highest level in more than 2 years, suggesting some softening in the labor market that could aid the Federal Reserve's fight against inflation. Still, the labor market remains tight, with the monthly job openings and labor turnover survey, or JOLTS, from the Labor Department on Tuesday showing 1.6 vacancies for every unemployed person. That compared to 1.7 in February. Fed officials who started a 2-day policy meeting on Tuesday are closely watching this ratio. The U.S. Central Bank is expected to raise its benchmark overnight interest rate by another 25 basis points to the 5 to 5.25% range on Wednesday, before potentially pausing its fastest monetary policy tightening campaign since the 1980s. And every time they do, by the way, And we've seen this like 3 or 4 times when they try to slow it down, when they try to pause it, or try to go without having a rate hike. We see another big spike in inflation. Some of that's mitigated right now because the spending in DC is supposed to be at a deadlock. We won't be talking about the debt ceiling today, but with government being a deadlock, the spending is supposed to be in a deadlock. We'll see what actually happens. I don't have any faith that Republicans are going to hold true to what they campaigned on. But we will see what happens with that and where this goes. And finally, the housing market. Something we haven't talked about in quite a while, but from Insider. A former IMF official says it's very likely U.S. home prices fall 15 to 20%. Please. Oh wait, no, I'm not supposed to be cheering for that. As a credit crunch creates a lose-lose scenario for the housing sector and the debt ceiling standoff threatens a substantial recession. From William Edwards. There has been a major pullback in lending from regional banks over the last several weeks. Those institutions are trying to stay liquid enough to ride out the losses they've taken in bonds and the outflows of deposits this year. Both consumers and businesses are reporting that it's more difficult to access credit in the current environment, and the percentage of banks saying that they're tightening their lending standards has surged. In other words, we're in a so-called credit crunch. According to Desmond Lackman, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and former deputy director at the International Monetary Fund, that's precipitating a sharp decline in home prices for 2 reasons. On the one hand, regional banks are responsible for most of the mortgages loaned out in the US. If these smaller institutions are loaning out less money, this further hurts demand in the housing market, meaning home prices have to fall accordingly. On the other hand, a credit crunch puts the U.S. economy at a significant risk of a recession, Lockman said. In a recession, unemployment levels rise and spending falls. This is also bad for the demand side of the equation on the housing market. Housing kind of gets hit 2 ways here, Lockman told Insider. Housing gets hit by tighter credit conditions, but then it also gets hit if the economy goes into a recession, both very true. Lockman reiterated his call from 2022 that home prices will fall 15 to 20, peak to trough, and said that such an outcome is very likely, but that it would take time, according to the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index. Home prices are already down 4.9% from their peak in June 2022 to February 2023. During the mid-2000s housing crisis, the index fell 27%. Home prices rose slightly from January to February, but it will remain unclear whether it will be a sustainable bottom. Now, we may not get the worst case scenario out of this. And one of the things that's going to come up with this is if people are looking into a situation where they're either getting ready to downsize or needing to move, again, like I said at the top of the show, for an emergency job change or migration or having to go help a sick relative, or even if the rest of the bills from the inflation cause the bottom to fall out or they lose their job is another big thing off of there. A lot of them, especially the ones who were not able to wait until the housing market crashed and bought at the peak, are going to be up shit creek without a paddle, because they're never going to get out of their house what they put into it, especially, again, if they were buying in 2021, 2022, and times like that, when the housing prices were being either overbid or just shot up in all kinds of prices. But when we look at what's happening with this, we're also not looking at what we saw in 2008. When, again, we were tightening monetary policy, raising the base interest rate, but a lot of people at the time had an adjustable rate mortgage where they had picked it up at a possibly higher rate with the expectation that it would go down because we were moving into a situation of easing monetary policy. But, suddenly, with the adjustable rate, when the benchmark rate went up, you've gone from a 3% mortgage to a 12.5% mortgage, or ridiculous numbers like that, and you suddenly can't afford the payments anymore. A lot of people, rightly so, looked at the adjustable rate market and said, oh hell no, we're not going through that again, and locked themselves into fixed rates whenever possible. I think there are still some arms out there, but I think they're getting way fewer and further between at this point. So we're not going to have that mitigating factor that's forcing people out of their houses, but we're still going to see a pretty significant drop. according to all the experts. We will see what happens. I kind of expected it to already happen here, so we will see where that goes, what happens with this. Let's get into the main news of the day. And we've actually got to start with some F's in the chat for the day today, because we have lost another rock icon. Canadian singer-songwriter Gordon Lightfoot, dead at 84 years old. So one thing we can say for this is the Sundown and Edmund Fitzgerald singer he didn't die young. He lived a long and healthy life. He got to experience a lot. He got to write one of the great industrial songs in the world, honestly. That was one thing that I do miss, because, we had the rap revolution, and that kind of moved into the new country revolution of a lot of money cash hoes. Like, the rap came out, was like, everything is about my bling and my money and my cash and everything, and then country started doing the same thing. Look, I got my brand new Chevy with a lift kit. But we never got songs in my generation about actual industry, exciting people to go out into the workforce, like we did with things like Convoy, or, yes, even the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. But let's read about Gordon Lightfoot. From Dennis Romero. Gordon Lightfoot, Canada's answer to U.S. singer-songwriters who provided the soundtrack for baby boomers coming of age amid a countercultural revolution, died Monday, his publicist said. He was 84. Lightfoot died at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto of natural causes, publicist Victoria Lord said. On April 11th, he announced the cancellation of his 2023 performance scheduled in North America. A statement cited unspecified health-related issues, and it said he expected to recover. Surprise! Lightfoot accomplished a feat more rarefied in popular music today, essentially becoming a one-man act, who performed his own critically acclaimed music, including his most noted mid-60s songs, Early Morning Rain and For Lovin' Me. '80s Kid says, once we became cashless, I wonder what rappers will rap about then. He wrote songs for Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Marty Robbins, and his 1968 album, Did She Mention My Name, earned him his first Grammy nomination for Best Folk Performance. There would be 4 other Grammy nominations, as well as an induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2012. He recorded 5 core albums for the United Artists before he continued his career with Warner Reprise from the 70s to the 90s. The 2012 release, All Live, represented his only live album since those original United Artists releases. Lightfoot's easygoing melancholy Sundown would be his only U.S. #1 hit, peaking in late June 1974 and spending 18 weeks on Billboard's Hot 100. In 2012, he appeared as the headliner at the Grammy Museum's An Evening With series in Los Angeles to talk about his epic narrative hit from '76, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It's a whole story unto itself from start to finish, he said, and it still goes on this day. Some big names recorded or performed his songs. They included Bob Dylan, Elvis Presley, Sarah McLachlan, Barbra Streisand, Harry Belafonte, Jane's Addiction. That, by the way, seems almost contradictory. I don't know what Jane's Addiction did of his, but I'm kind of curious at this point. Glenn Campbell, that seems a little bit more in line, and Toby Keith. I don't know what Toby Keith recorded of his either. That's interesting. I think most names in there I would have expected, except for those 2. His official biography even notes that house music icon Ultra Nate was joined by noted dance music performers Amber and Jocelyn Enriquez in recording a club version of his song If You Could Read My Mind in 1998. I remember that. Lightfoot was recognized early by his parents as having musical talent, and at age 12 he won a contest that allowed him to perform at Massey Hall in Toronto, which became a frequent tour stop. He started out as a performer in barbershop quartets, and then became a member of musical duos, but his time didn't come until he shed the other musicians around him and wrote prodigiously. He tried to make his way in Los Angeles in the late 50s, but he found success only after he returned to Toronto and embraced his folk music scene the next decade. Lightfoot's rolling guitar-paced music, influenced by Dylan and the era's other folk artists, was equally as at home on the radio alongside fellow Canadian Anne Murray, as it was next to the Eagles. That's a very fair point, by the way. At least 7 of his albums have been certified gold in the US, a designation that means sales of 500,000 or more. In 2002, he suffered a near-death bout with illness but survived, according to his official bio, and he continued to record and perform. In the next year, the Office of the Governor General of Canada said Lightfoot, born in Orillia, Ontario in 1938, was one of the country's most beloved musicians. Lightfoot has been telling our stories in song for over 5 decades. It's said as part of an award under his earlier Order of Canada recognition, he possesses a unique ability to blend contemporary urban music with our traditional roots. Genuine and reserved, he has a down-to-earth style that defies categorization. So, and obviously with my father's love of classic rock, I grew up with Gordon Lightfoot. It wasn't until much, much later when I would have actually been able to recognize his songs as his. In fact, some of them I thought were done by other people. Some of his solo stuff, obviously, there was a litany of things that were actually done by other people, but yeah, this is another one of those artists that has influenced my life. And our world is going to be a lot quieter with him gone. So, Godspeed, Gordon Lightfoot. All right, now we shift gears and take our F's off the chat and talk about the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day for CNN because all of its people have turned on them again. Scott Dworkin making the announcement to begin with. Breaking, CNN is doing a town hall with indicted Donald Trump on May 10th. Because they've learned absolutely nothing. No one should watch this trash. Now, mind you, keep in mind that Dworkin is actually going to be sitting there mesmerized. Eyes on the screen, not being able to blink. He's going to say something racist. I want to hear him say something racist. I want to be the first person to come out and say that he said something racist. Oh my God, he's going to say something racist. I know he's going to just, come on, Donald, say something racist. Say something, I'm going to watch it, I'm going to tweet about it, I'm going to call him racist. Oh my God. Partially because that's the kind of person that Scott Dworkin is. He can come out and puff up his chest and say, nobody ever watched CNN because they gave credence to this person. But yeah, he's going to be glued to his television when they air this. We're probably going to air clips of this on Contemporary. Dworkin goes on and says, this is absolutely ludicrous. There's no reason to give the biggest pathological liar in politics a platform to spread his bullshit. I mean, we let MSDNC on the air. Trump doesn't belong on television, he belongs in prison. Well, we've got that pesky Fifth Amendment. Nobody should be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and you guys have yet to be able to come back out and actually provide a due process. You shake your fists an awful lot, but all we have is one dubious indictment that's probably going to get thrown out even with the most liberal judge out there, because the felony that upgrades his misdemeanors to a felony isn't being prosecuted. So we have that. Mograi says, come on, Bill Clinton was able to spread way more bullshit. I'm telling you, in the deepest part of my heart, I'm going to tell you, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. I'm going to turn on the tears now. I'm going to tell you, the American people, how much this grieves me that you don't believe me. And then later we found out it was all true anyway. Let's read a bit about this, starting with the host network here from CNN. Trump to appear at CNN Town Hall in New Hampshire. Coming from CNN staff, no author given. Former President Trump will participate in a CNN presidential town hall next week in New Hampshire, the network announced on Monday. CNN This Morning anchor Caitlin Collins will moderate The event at St. Anselm College, which will air at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on May 10th, and will feature the former president taking questions from New Hampshire Republicans and undeclared voters who plan to vote in the 2024 GOP presidential primary, because New Hampshire is a closed primary state. This will be Trump's first appearance on CNN since the 2016 presidential campaign. The town hall comes as Trump has quickly emerged as the frontrunner in the Republican field for president in 2024. A handful of also-rans have entered the 2024 race. By the way, there is a one-off video that's coming. I need to sit down and find some time to record it. I was going to do it yesterday, but my errands ran long, and because of the traffic incident that set us late, I was not able to get back in time to go back and record that. Though Trump's biggest potential rival, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is dead in the water, is still weighing a possible campaign. Trump's campaign and political allies have continued to ramp up their attacks on DeSantis, as the former president has racked up congressional endorsements, including from Florida Republicans who routinely work with DeSantis. But the former president is running to retake the White House at the same time he's been indicted in New York and faces additional legal peril in Washington and Georgia. Where did our music go? Oh, there it is. I was going to say, that went awfully quiet for quite a bit of time. Usually the live stream for Video Game Study Lounge doesn't go that long. Quietly. Trump has pleaded not guilty last month to 34 felony criminal charges of falsifying business records in Manhattan, a case stemming from hush money payments made during the 2016 campaign to women claiming an extramarital affairs with Trump, which he has denied. The former president is also under scrutiny by special counsel Jack Smith, who's leading a pair of investigations, one into this January 6th selfie fest, and the other in the handling of classified documents, both of which have absolutely zero merit. And Fulton County DA Fannie Willis plans to announce charges this summer from an investigation in efforts to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia, which also have absolutely no basis in reality. I've listened to that phone call in full, not just the little part that CNN put out, the little 2-minute part that said, "Okay, well, Brad Raffensperger, come out here and say," and then a big pause as they do the jump cut, "that I'm going to go out and find 11,000 votes. The clip that came out off that was so incredibly edited, and again, I've listened to the raw file, 11 minutes of it. It was hard to listen to. Trump has said he's running for president regardless of criminal charges he may face. He's disparaged all of the investigations as possibly politically motivated witch hunts. The former president is also being sued by former advice columnist E. Jean Carroll, who alleges that Trump sexually assaulted her in the mid-90s and subsequently defamed her after she went public about the incident. Trump has also denied Carroll's allegations. That also may warrant a one-off video, because the moron Krasensteins are trying to push this out and say that this is a trial. He's going to trial for rape, which he's not. And they continually use the word trial to imply criminal charges when this is a civil suit over defamation. This is E. Jean Carroll trying to prove that she has suffered financial loss of readership, loss of revenue, because apparently when the Donald came out and said that I never saw this woman, I never touched this woman, it meant that MAGA readers wouldn't go read her column even after she came out and made the accusation. Something to which I would argue, and I will plan to do in the one-off video, that in fact this probably boosted her ability to draw an audience, because all of the anti-Trumpers are out there saying, "Yes, sister, let me go buy another one of your books. You're so wronged, and Tara Reid is such a liar." Trump has refused to acknowledge that he lost the 20... I'm not even going to read that paragraph. That is so editorialized and full of crap that it has no basis in reality. The town hall will stream live for paid TV subscribers via CNN.com and CNN OTT and mobile apps under the TV channels, or CNN Go where available. But not CNN Plus, because that went down the river. The town hall will also be available on demand beginning Thursday, May 11th. to pay TV subscribers via CNN.com, CNN apps, and cable operator platforms. And it will be all over Rumble, hopefully in the raw form, by the following day. A little bit of editorialization coming from Politico on the event. Trump to sit down with CNN, an implicit dig at Fox. From Alex Isenstadt. The Donald has decided to consort with the enemy. The ex-president will participate in a town hall event with CNN, a network he called fake, and whose reporters have routinely chastised while serving in office. The event, which will take place at New Hampshire's St. Anselm College next week, will mark a major moment in the intersection of politics and the media. In the still nascent 2024 GOP primary, it's also the latest illustration of an aggressive media strategy that Trump's team is adopting. And by the way, they are hiding this behind the paywall for a very, very big reason, because this will boost their revenue. This will be probably one of the most viewed CNN events in a very long time, possibly since 2016. The former president and his staff have re-engaged the mainstream press corps after largely shunning them. They have been in talks with sit-downs for several other notable outlets, including NPC. He has also invited an array of reporters from mainstream outlets to fly with him on his planes to and from campaign events. Those in the former president's orbit believe that by giving interviews and access to mainstream outlets, they can broaden Trump's message and create a contrast with Ron DeSantis, who has widely been seen as more closed off towards the mainstream outlets while granting interviews to conservative ones. But the decision to participate in the town hall is also an implicit rebuke of Fox. While Trump has long been close with the conservative-leaning network, he has complained of late that the organization has turned against him. Those close to the former president privately contend that Fox News and other outlets owned by Murdoch have been favorable towards DeSantis. Well, that's what they're always going to do. That's what they've always done. Sean Hannity kneels down in front of whatever Republican has the most power. He has been doing that his entire career. He chastised Trump in the beginning, until he started to gain popularity. And then he became Trump's best friend. Rush was also the same way, by the way. As much as he tries to deny it, as much as people in his orbit try to deny it, Limbaugh was the same way. And again, he's another one that's been that way for his entire career. And I enjoyed his program at the very end, and I still understand the fact that he was that way for his entire career. In mid-April, the Republican National Committee announced that Fox would host the first debate. Shortly after that, Trump announced on his social media platform that he had not given his approval for it and suggested he would not participate in a forum hosted by angry Trump and MAGA-hating anchors. It's his prerogative, but he can't get his ideas out at that point either. Well, mind you, he can go back out and hold an event, and C-SPAN will cover it, and people restlessly try to take clips out of it, but he doesn't have that raw primetime appeal. And members of my family watching, I don't know if I'm going to read that one out loud, Mogwai, but you're absolutely right. So, again, probably one of the best rated CNN programs coming up in the near future. We will look at video clips, we will see what happens with that. We've got other news to go over here. Other things in Trump world, including this one, which is tremendously stupid. From Newsweek. Trump's military record set straight with a note from Twitter. This is coming from Ewan Palmer over at Newsweek, talking about an AI-generated image, actually several of them, showing Trump in various military uniforms that he never wore. Which, by the way, everybody knew going into this. This was a Laura Loomer requested AI-generated field that she was using to put out for advertising. And it backfired tremendously, by the way. Twitter users are being made aware of Donald Trump's lack of military service that everybody knew after a computer-generated image of the former president in full army gear was posted on the social media site. Bridget Gabriel, a Trump supporter and the founder of the anti-Muslim group Act for America. It's not an anti-Muslim group, by the way. Posted the AI-generated image of the former president in green camouflage while holding an assault weapon on Monday night. President Trump is defending America in ways that Biden will never comprehend, Gabrielle tweeted. While Gabrielle may not have been suggesting the image of Trump in army attire was genuine, because, again, everybody in the known universe knows that it's not genuine, the post was still flagged by Twitter's Community Notes service, which aims to collaboratively add context to potentially misleading tweets by including additional information from users below tweets. Look, anybody out there who thinks that a billionaire son of a millionaire served in the military does not have the mental capacity to vote. This is something that everybody, even his most ardent supporters, knew going in. Let's see, where are we? Once a note is suggested by a contributor, it will be posted beneath the tweet. If enough contributors from different points of view rate that note as helpful. In this case, the approved note stated the image of Trump is AI generated and that Donald Trump has never served in the military. He avoided the Vietnam War draft through a podiatry claim, and the fact that his father had all the fucking money in New York. The note included a link to a 2018 article by the New York Times, a former newspaper, that examined claims that a doctor diagnosed Trump with bone spurs in his heels in 1968 as a favor to the former president's father. So Trump would not be called to serve in the conflict. There's the reader context. This part of the note was temporarily removed and re-added later. Twitter's guidelines state that a community note will not be labeled, removed, or addressed by Twitter unless it's found to be violating its rules, terms of service, or our privacy policy, or flagged by fellow Twitter users. Once again, if you do not have the mental capacity to know that a New York real estate mogul's son in the 60s didn't go to the Vietnam War, you have no business holding a ballot. Period. End of story. I have the most bone spurs, the best spurs. Nobody has spurs like me. So, there's our Trump world news for the day. Let's talk about the southern border, including a trio right in a row from the Associated Press. Only two of them having to do with the border, obviously, but from Politico. U.S. is planning to send 1,500 more troops to the southern border. This is from Alexander Ward, Laura Seligman, and Joe Gould. Oh, and by the way, Mom, I did send a message because I replied back to the happy birthday message right before I went on air to your brother as well. So he might be here too. I don't know if he is or not, but he might be here. If not, he'll see this later. Hi. The Biden admin is planning to send 1,500 more active duty troops temporarily to the southern border to assist agents ahead of an expected influx of migrants seeking asylum, 3 U.S. officials said on Tuesday. The move comes as Title 42, the public health law that permits the U.S. to deny asylum and migrations claims for public health reasons, is set to expire on May 11th. Which is mildly ridiculous that it's still there, but it's also mildly ridiculous that our friends on the right are still trying to milk this Title 42 thing for everything that's worth, instead of legislating an actual solution to this. They've been saying the pinko pox has been over since basically the beginning of 2021, but they're trying to milk that one commie coof provision for every last drop they can get out of the damn thing, instead of legislating the way they're supposed to be. Some senior U.S. officials say the end of Title 42 could entice more people seeking a better life in America to present themselves at the U.S.-Mexico border, and even more of them to try to sneak past it. The service members, mainly coming from Army units, will not have a law enforcement role. They will be armed for self-defense. But will be performing, monitoring, and administrative tasks, only freeing up Border Patrol officials to process migrant claims, the three officials said. You know, I suggested that we do this back in 2015. The additional troops which are being sent to fill a request from the Department of Homeland Security will fill critical capability gaps, including detection and monitoring, data entry, and warehouse support. According to one of the officials, they will be there for up to 90 days, after which the military reservists or contractors will do the work, two of the officials said. Hours after Politico's report, the Department of Homeland Security confirmed the order in a statement. U.S. Customs and Border Protection is investing in technology and personnel to reduce its need for DoD support in the coming years, and we will continue to call on Congress to support us in this task, it reads. And yet they won't do their jobs. Yeah, that would require Lapdog Lindsay in the ground to do actual work instead of being a talking head. He's something head. I don't know, there's a gay joke in there somewhere, I just don't know what it is. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin approved the official request from the DHS, sending soldiers to join 2,500 National Guard troops already activated to assist law enforcement at the border. The National Guard troops already at the border are deployed in active duty status, which means their mission is funded by the federal government and not their respective states. According to the DoD official, they are assisting border agents with detection and monitoring. President Brandon last week signed an EO authorizing the admin to call up active duty forces to address drug trafficking at the southern border, essentially pre-approving the mission, DoD official said, but they won't be there in a law enforcement capacity. They're going to do law enforcement, but they won't be there in a law enforcement capacity, or at least by what the EO says. DHS then asked the Pentagon for assistance. Army Chief of Staff General James McConville declined to discuss the order when asked by Politico before his Senate Appropriations Defense Subcommittee hearing on the Army's 2024 budget proposal on Tuesday. We're not going to comment on that right now, he said. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth also declined to comment before the official DHS statement. But don't worry, they're not going to be there in law enforcement capacity. They're just going to have select fire, assault weapons, to defend an actual U.S. border, not a border in some godless country across the world. You know, they're doing what our military should actually be doing, oddly enough, which is weird. Let's grab one from the Associated Press. U.S. readies second attempt at speedy border asylum screenings. From Elliot Spagat over at the Disassociated Press. President Brandon scrapped expedited asylum screenings during his first month in office as part of a gutting of Trump admin foreign policies that included building a wall with Mexico. Now he's preparing his own version. So he's going to do the same thing, he's just going to go back and take the credit for it. Like the insulin price cap. He's going to do the exact same thing, but he's first going to dismantle the other guy's edition of it, and then go back and do the exact same thing and say, hey man, look, I'm a hero, look at me. I made immigration better, man. Trump's fast-track reviews drew sharp criticism from internal government watchdog agencies as the percentage of people who passed those credible fear interviews plummeted. But the Biden admin has insisted that speedy screening for asylum seekers is different. Well, yeah, it's because he's trying to get a more active slave class for his big business buddies. But the Biden admin has insisted that speedy screening for asylum seekers is different. Interviews will be done exclusively by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, not by Border Patrol agents, and everyone will have access to legal counsel. That I'm not 100% against. I mean, they don't have the right to be successful, but they have the right to seek it. Anytime you talk to the government, you should have legal counsel. No matter who you are. By the way, I stand against a lot of my more hardline conservative friends on that because I remind them of the fact, and they say the same thing about right to self-defense, freedom of speech and everything, but I remind them of the fact that the right to seek counsel, to defend yourself against the government in that manner, is God-given. That's not government-given. The government provides the public defender as a courtesy, but the right to actually seek counsel is God-given. To seek an intermediary, to seek somebody who understands the law while you're going up against the purveyor of the law, that's God-given. Or by your creator if you're atheist. The decision to use fast-track screenings comes as the pinko pox asylum restrictions are set to expire on May 11th, and the U.S. government prepares for an expected increase in illegal crossings from Mexico. The Texas border cities of El Paso, Laredo, and Brownsville have declared local states of emergency in recent days to prepare for the anticipated influx. Betcha Kamala won't be going and visiting El Paso now for a photo op 10 miles away from the border. The border czar who's never visited the border. Let's go, Brandon. Normally, about 3 or 4 migrants pass credible fear interviews, though far fewer eventually win asylum. But during the 5 months of Trump-era program, only 23% passed the initial screening, while 69% failed, and 9% withdrew, according to the Government Accountability Office. That doesn't math. 23, 69, and 9 is 101%. That don't math. I'm sure there's Dewey Decimal places in there or something. Those who get past initial screenings are generally freed in the U.S. to pursue their cases on immigration court, which typically takes 4 years. Critics rather say the court backlog encourages more people to seek asylum. To pass screenings, migrants must convince an asylum officer that they have significant possibility of prevailing before a judge on arguments that they face persecution in their home countries on grounds of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership of a social group. But they've also got safe third country, which is still in place, which means they have to seek asylum in the first safe country, which in many cases is Mexico. Under the Biden admin's fast-track program, those who don't qualify will be deported in a matter of days or just a few weeks, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said on Thursday. So, they're going to try this. And again, they're going to try to do a Trump-era program and try to take the credit for it. Yeah, 80 million votes, folks. Alright, what else do we have? Another one from the Associated Press. 85% of Mexican union contracts weren't voted on by workers. This is a bit of a local story from Mexico, but just an interesting aside. Because Mexico is a much more progressive country. And this kind of goes down the same avenue of forced participation. Another solo video that'll be coming off in the coming days. I've got no author given on this one. Mexico's Labor Department said 85% of the country's 140,000 official registered labor contracts are in danger of being canceled because they failed to meet Monday's deadline to have a union member vote on them. Oh, the cartels will still push their unions. It doesn't matter if they get voted on. Under labor reforms that helped to win the renewal of the US-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement. Starting in 2019, Mexico told unions with registered contracts they had to submit the labor pacts to secret ballot votes by workers within 4 years. The small percentage of contracts meeting Monday's deadline reflects what Mexican officials acknowledge has been a long-standing practice of labor leaders in negotiating contracts with little or no worker input. Are we disconnected? I saw a little white line pop up. Spectrum? Don't do this. Actually, it looks like we're going to be good. To ensure wages stays low so they can keep factories in Mexico. Wages in Mexico, at roughly 1/8 or less of U.S. wages, have drawn millions of manufacturing jobs out of the United States. Only about 20,000 contracts complied and were confirmed by votes as of May 1st, 2023. The deadline for doing so, the Labor Department said the remaining 120,000 will be nullified, unless those unions have scheduled votes between now and July 31st. That's likely to be a tiny percentage of the contracts, which is going to do hell on free trade because that puts the majority of factory work in Mexico in violation of the USMCA, which is going to have an interesting effect on our supply chain as we hit either deep recession from natural causes or the default of the US debt. Does anybody have any popcorn? Because this will get interesting. And the last one in a row from the Associated Press, some Montana news for us. Montana Rep. Zoe Zephyr sues over removal from the House floor. From Amy Beth Hansen and Matthew Brown. Montana State Rep. Zoe Zephyr asked a court Monday to allow for her to return to the House floor after she was silenced and barred for chiding her Republican colleagues over legislation to restrict gender-affirming health care and for encouraging protesters. See, that last part, that's against House decorum rules, is the reason that you were knocked out on your ass. Now, Zoe Zephyr will come out and try to tell you that's because she's transsexual. She's not. Or, well, she is, but that's not the reason. It's the same reason the three from Tennessee, the Tennessee Three, were kicked off their committee assignments and eventually 2 of them out of their seats before their corrupt internal governments came back and put them back into their seats. You broke decorum, you encouraged the protests. So under the House rules in Montana, you lost your seat. And by the way, I have seen calls for both state and federal legislators to be pulled out of their seats from the Republican side for far less than what you did. So do keep that in mind. Attorneys for the first-term lawmaker sued in state district court in Helena on behalf of Zephyr, a transsexual Democrat who represents a liberal district in the college town of Missoula, and several constituents who the attorneys say were being denied their right to adequate representation. Zephyr, whose comments in the Montana legislature have made her a prominent figure in the transgender rights, and also by the fact that she's being elevated by the news media, and conversations about the muffling of dissent in state houses, said in a statement Monday that she and her constituents were targeted because I dare to give a voice to the values and needs of transgender people like myself. No, it's because you encouraged a group of protesters from the local college to come in and do a sit-in in the House chamber. The legal challenge against House Speaker Matt Regier and Sergeant-at-Arms Brad Murfitt comes with just days left at the legislature's biennial session. A spokesperson for Montana AG Austin Knudsen, a Republican whose office will defend the case, said the lawsuit was frivolous. This is performance litigation. Fair. Political activism masquerading as a lawsuit, said Emily Flower, Knudsen's press secretary. She added that the court's decision blocking the legislature's censure of Zephyr would violate the separation of powers between the branches of government. I've not read Montana's state constitution, but if it's based on the U.S. Constitution, that is a stretch. But I would have to look into Montana local law to know whether that is actually a stretch or not. So, that's up in the air. Murphy said he would not comment on the lawsuit, but Regier did not return a telephone message and an email seeking comment. Yeah, this is going absolutely nowhere. And I would be interested to see if Missoula and Montana as a whole has a provision like Tennessee does where Missoula can go back, the district can go back and nominate whoever they want to go back into the seat without holding a special election. In that case, Zephyr will probably go back and get her seat back by that, but again, I don't know if they have that provision or not. That's not a national law, that's a state level law by the state level constitutions. And I'm sure the news media will be telling us all about this one, so we will see probably more of this. One that we probably won't see any more of, though, I had to pull this from non-green check verified advocate, which is part of the reason I don't believe it's true, because especially given how much of a voice and a platform Zephyr has been given at this point, if this was actually true, this would be front page CNN right now, and it's not. But from non-green check verified advocate, Montana transgender rep Zoe Zephyr's girlfriend foils swatting attempt. Now, I've not done anything in my local area, which I should, and I probably shouldn't admit this on the air. But I know when I lived in Redacted, where I used to live, I did have an agreement, and I sat down and I talked with the local police precinct. I talked with the chief and said, okay, I live in your area, and I do a semi-controversial news show. It's very small right now, so there's probably not a lot to worry about, but if it ever takes off, we're probably going to be in a situation where somebody will find my address, tell people where my address is, and then people will come in and start calling you guys and saying that I've murdered somebody in my house and I'm going wild with a gun, or I have a bunch of bombs, or something stupid like that. So, here's my phone number. Call me first. You can come out to the scene. That's absolutely fine. But if you get this address, and I gave them my address, call me first. And by the way, you can see in every window. The apartment goes across the entire back of the building. It's all on one side. You don't have to surround. You can see in. You'll be able to tell pretty quickly if there's a fight going on. But if you bust in, I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to defend myself. And I don't want to get hurt, and I don't want to see you get hurt. So this is what's happening. I hope that we never have to go through this, and we never did. But you do have to be proactive in something like this. This is from Christopher Wiggins, a transsexual journalist in a relationship with Montana's sole elected transsexual legislature, thwarted a swatting attempt at her Maryland residence Tuesday morning. She credits contacting local police months ago for the incident not ending in violence. Erin Reed is a trans activist and independent journalist who is often attacked online. She's been tracking anti-trans legislation across the country. Reed was most recently targeted by far-right extremists because she's in a relationship with Zephyr, who has gained national attention over the last 2 weeks for being censured by Republican lawmakers in the Montana legislature, in spite of the fact that before today, nobody even knew who this person was. Tuesday morning, Zephyr tweeted somebody tried to send a SWAT team to her partner's home and have armed law enforcement storm the residence. So, and again, by the way, the fact that this was not with Zephyr's high profile, not necessarily Reed's high profile, but with Zephyr's high profile, that this wasn't on the front page of CNN, kind of tells me that they're full of shit. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But one thing that I will say is if you do make content that is even remotely right or even independent in some other way, you should probably have at least some agreement with your local police. Let them know who you are, where you're at, what your address is. I know. This is not something that somebody like me would normally advocate, who is against the police in most instances, because I'm against the power of the government to put that much control over our lives. But the problem with that is when it comes down to it, you don't want the bullets to come in and start blazing out of nowhere. Alright, another one from the Associated Press. DeSantis signs death penalty and crime bills as 2024 run looms. From Anthony Izaguirre. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Monday signed a bill allowing the death penalty in child rape convictions, despite a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that banned capital punishment in such cases. DeSantis, a Republican, also signed two other components of his criminal justice legislative package during a ceremony at a policing museum in a city outside of Orlando. The governor, who is expected to announce a run for president in the coming weeks, has leaned into an aggressive conservative agenda on crime and other issues ahead of his expected candidacy, as he seeks to bolster support among the Republican base. The signings came as DeSantis has faced widespread criticism over his battle with Disney, and marked his first appearance after an overseas trade mission, with the routinely on-message governor returning the practiced rhetoric about his ability to implement conservative policy, which even comes down to putting a clamp on free speech. After SB 269, this man lost any ability for me to ever support him. And I hope most of you see through that as well, by the way. I really do. Unfortunately, I can't tell you who else to vote for because, the GOP won't give us anybody else. The Donald is the front runner. That does not mean that he is a good candidate, by any stretch of the imagination. Yes, voting for the Donald will send a message that you can throw everything at a candidate, and it still won't diminish his support. And it also sends a message that those on the left are trying too hard to get rid of him. But the fact of the matter is that his last run of the presidency cost us massive amounts in the deficit. The tax cuts were nice. I've always said that the tax cuts were really nice, but they caused massive runs in the deficit. And several omnibus bills that we were promised were never going to pass, and were going to get vetoed. And a tremendous price tag that we are still trying to pay off. I waffle between whether or not I will or won't vote for him in 2024 if he becomes the nominee. I'm right now on the not side of things. But again, who else do we have? Governor Executive Order. Anti-free speech Governor Executive Order. We should throw that one on there. I can't decide if I want to run for president or not. Tim Scott. Female Bush. Arkansas Bush. Come buy my book. They haven't brought anybody forward that's worth voting for. We're really delivering a big agenda, so this one's important, but admittedly very small part of an overall large agenda and bold agenda that's really setting the terms of the debate for this country, quite frankly. The death penalty law DeSantis signed is intended to get the conservative-controlled U.S. Supreme Court to reconsider an 2008 ruling that found it unconstitutional to use capital punishment in child sexual battery cases. It's unconstitutional for the government to do it. Wood chipper enthusiasts, not so much. This is not official advice. Florida is among a handful of states with existing laws that allow for capital punishment of child rape convictions, but has not used the punishment given the high court ruling. The Florida Supreme Court has also ruled against the use of capital punishment in sexual battery convictions. The legislation, which goes into effect October 1st, would authorize the state to pursue capital punishment when an adult is convicted of sexually battering a child under 12, and provides a framework in the state's capital punishment laws for prosecutors to do so. It was approved in Florida legislature with bipartisan support. DeSantis said that he believed the Supreme Court's decision was wrong, adding, "This bill sets up a procedure to be able to challenge that precedent and to be able to say that in Florida we think that the worst of the worst crimes deserve the worst of the worst punishments." I'm against capital punishment. Partially because it is possible to be wrong. You have to go through so many hurdles and hoops to get things through the government side of things, whereas again, if you catch the dude in bed with your 9-year-old daughter, none of the rest of what I could be alluding to is official advice. We're going to leave it at that. But the biggest problem that I've had with capital punishment is not the fact that I don't think it should be done. It's the fact that, once you go back to... It's one of the few forms of punishment out there that you can't undo if new evidence comes up and acquits the person. And again, everybody who's going to be going through the trial procedure is hearing narratives that have been recanted. There's not an eyewitness in that court. Well, sometimes there is, but the people who are handing down the punishment are not an eyewitness to it. So, but the other end of that is, if you've done this to a child, that's something that's going to carry with that child for the rest of his or her life. So, I'm a bit on the fence about this one, honestly. Briefly here from Axios, DeSantis signs new death penalty bill vowing Supreme Court showdown. So, some of this is we do already know this, but yes, it does appear that his big thing is to try to get this in front of the Supreme Court. From Yakub Reyes. Ron DeSantis signed a bill Monday allowing Florida to impose the death penalty on those convicted of sexual battery against children younger than 12. The legislation is in direct violation of the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Kennedy v. Louisiana, in which it found it unconstitutional for states to use capital punishment for a crime other than murder. Basically, the only time it's constitutional is you killed somebody, we're going to kill you back.